Hello and welcome back. In this video, I want to discuss hooks. Now, we had shown a number of examples of hooks in the past. For example, we had looked at the use memo hook. We have looked at the use state hook. But what is a hook, you might be asking? And that's a reasonable question. And a hook is really a function, just like a component is a function. And it has generally, I would say, its own state. And the reason why it has its own state is usually we want to have our components update when something of value changes and then cause the component to re-render. And this is kind of the power of hooks, is that you can create these functions that when some kind of data changes, we can cause our component to re-render. Okay, so I want to show this component is a little complex, but it's a very practical hook, like one that you would actually use in a real project. And so I think it's simple enough that I can probably explain it all to you and that you can understand it and that it will actually be helpful. Okay, so let's start with how to write your function or your hook. The first thing that you have to know is, well, a hook is just a function. It's wrote just like any other function. In this file, we're going to export default our function, use window sizes. And what's important here is that when you write a hook, it always has to start with use, a lowercase word use. Okay, that's how React knows it's a hook. Okay, and then basically you can just camel case the entire thing and name it whatever you want. In this case, it's going to be window sizes. Okay, and we can see that our function returns window size. So this function is going to return something back to the component that the component can use. And so whatever it returns is going to be this, in this case, it's window sizes, and this is an object. If we go up here, we can see here's the window sizes defined. And so that we can see that we have like window heights, page heights, page widths. Yeah, so the purpose of this hook is to get the current page and screen height, as well as where, the page is in its X and Y coordinates, as well as for things like device pixel ratio. Basically, I made this hook to get all the window data that I need for like positional and size type things. And this hook is good for, like, for example, I want to make sure that when the screen shrinks to a certain size, maybe I hide something or I show something if the screen gets big enough. Generally, I use things like Bootstrap, but the reactive tools aren't always good enough to do the effect that I'm looking to do. So using a hook can be really good here. Okay. So we've defined our function, right? And we're going to see inside here that we're using another hook inside of our hook, which is completely okay. This is the point of hooks, all right? Is that we have, this hook has its own state, all right? And it's going to have a sizes state and a set sizes function that will update this sizes output. And we can see down here that we return this value of sizes, right? And we're using use state here. This is the hook. And it's of type window sizes, just like it is up here. And then its default value is this window sizes function, which is this function right here, which calculates all the values for the window size, right? So it finds out what the context width is by looking at some bounding client rectangles and stuff. And then it returns this object with all the proper data inside of it, okay? And what we see here is another hook that we had discussed previously called use effect, right? And what does this do? So we know from previous lessons, use effect will run the first time the component is mounted or rendered, or another way to think about rendering is that the function has ran, okay? You think of the term of rendering because it makes a change on the screen, but in reality is just running through the entire function and then returning a value. We have this use effect hook, and it has this function inside of it here. And we see that its value, there's no values that are set here for it to look for. So this will just run the first time that this hook is used. Okay, and so that we see that we have a function inside of our function here called onResize. And it will run our set sizes function, and it'll set the value of our window sizes to here. Okay, and this is really the power of use effect, right? So I was talking about this in a previous video, like this is a use case where you want to use effect. We want to add an event listener to the window and listen to the resize event, right? And then call this function onResize. And then from this function here, we're going to return a different function. And this is our, when this hook is destroyed, or the component that it belongs to is destroyed, it will run this function and clean up our code. And we just want to make sure that we're removing our event listener. If you don't do this, then you would have just event listeners still on the element that you want. And then this could cause errors on the road and cause your application to crash if we don't get rid of this listener, right? And we return our sizes here. So let's go ahead and see this in actual action. So let's create a new, call this use window example. And create our file and export default function. We'll call this use window example. And we will get a value of our sizes is equal to use window sizes, like so. And then we will return container. Like we've done a few times before. And inside of here, we will have a div, and it will just say, let's just say window width, like this. And then we can get sizes dot window width, like so. And just to prove that this like kind of works, I'm just going to put console.log render right here. This is a common way that you might troubleshoot rendering issues. This is just to show you every single time that the component ends up rendering. So let's go ahead and put this in here like so. Clean this up. And we'll go take a look at what we have. So it says right now my window width is 1290. Okay, very cool. And we can see that this is completely reactive now. I can draw this in. We can even see it right up in the corner where it says 486, and on our window it says the width is 486, like so. And this is a way where you can use your hooks in a very React kind of way. So anytime you're trying to do things where you want your component to update, using the hooks like this is a good example. When you need a reusable function to be ran on potentially multiple components, that's an excellent place where you want to use hooks. So I hope that helps clear up what hooks actually are and how they work. And let's get on to building some actual examples.